let's listen.
QFM Los Angeles, playing music just for you. If there's something you want to hear, give me a call. 578-1067 is the number at K-Rock.
I can convince you to love me back, love me do. I want you walk, I'll get your right.
This is Richard Blade.
Okay, Richard, so one of your colleagues I interviewed on my show, Larry the Duck from Sirius Radio on the 80s cruise. What a wonderful guy, him and his wife. And it was a great interview, but we talked about the fact that WLIR, the groundbreaking radio station from Long Island, New York, how they broke the New Romantics, New Wave, kind of European, other places in the world music at the time, the New Wave music. And they would send somebody over to England, and they would get the records and bring them back, and they'd break them in New York. But you were doing the opposite on the other side of the country, and you had a juggernaut, which was your father.
Yep.
And him and I talked about it in the interview, Larry the Duck, and I said, Richard Blade had his dad who would get he must have had a great ear for music. He would go and send those records to Richard. He would break them in L.A., and they would bleed to the other parts of the country, like where I'm at in Detroit and places. But talk about your dad's role in that.
Well, Dad was so important, and you mentioned WLIR, which was an incredible radio station, and there were a few pivotal new wave stations around the country, and that was LIR, K-Rock in Los Angeles, 91X in San Diego, and Live 105 in San Francisco. And everyone had their different ways of getting the music. Now, because I'd been a DJ in England and Europe for a number of years before I came to America, I was on what they call the mailing list for all the major record companies, and they would send me all the new stuff and the white labels and the 12 inches before they were released. And they would come to my house, and I would probably get 60 to 70 records a week. Not all albums, probably 10 albums. The rest of them would be the 12 inches and the singles. And my poor dad, he would listen to every single one of them, because he couldn't afford to send all of these over, because nothing's heavier than a box of records, and to send them to America would be ridiculous. And if you sent them the equivalent of ground, which is by sea, it would take about 2 months to get here. By then the records would be old. So Dad would always send it airmail. But he'd be my own personal music director, and he'd listen to these records and send me 3 or 4 of the best. And he'd go, "You'll like this band. They're called Depeche Mode. I think they're French. Try listening to them." And then another one that he broke was Talk Talk, with Talk Talk. And he didn't know the name of the band. It was just said Talk Talk on the white label that was literally handwritten on by the promotion director. And he said, "Well, the song's called Talk Talk. I don't know what the band's called." And so he would do that. And so many of the English groups that we played were because my dad had found them and sent them over to me. So I was so blessed to have a father who was supportive and excited about my work. And I remember when I got the morning show on K-Rock, he sent me this great letter, and I actually have a copy of that letter in my book to this, because I saved all of Dad's stuff. He died, unfortunately, right as my career was taking off. And I saved that letter, and I put it in the book, and he said how excited he and Mom were that I'd be on the morning show, and he spelled K-Rock, K-R-O-C-K, but he was the best, and he helped break so many bands like Tears for Fears, Talk Talk, Depeche Mode, Spandau Ballet, Double D, Duran. So God bless Dad.
Sitting together on a stage getting ready for a tour with a new album out?
Not me, not really. I mean, I think if either Arcadia or Power Station had been hugely successful, it might have been a different story. That kind of possibility might have crept into our minds, but really, I was thinking for a long time, and I think.
No, I never thought. I didn't think.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think there's something about being a group that's very different to doing all these solo things. I mean, even though Power Station was a group of sorts, and I mean Arcadia was, it's not quite the same thing. I always thought we would do another record.
Hi, I'm Richard Blade here in the MV3 studios with Friday's live band. That's the Bangles. And it looks like LA is finally getting some great bands coming out after a long dry spell. We've got bands like the Plimsolls, Missing Persons, Berlin, and now 4 hot ladies. So would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Debbie Peterson, drums and vocals. I'm Vicki Peterson, lead guitar.
Susanna Hoffs, rhythm guitar and vocals. Annette Zelenskis, bass guitar.